Odysseus sailed from Ithaca for Troy. 10 years later, the war ended, and Greek ships began coming home. His did not. Years passed. Suitors filled his palace and demanded that Penelope choose another husband. She answered them with a trick. By day she wove a burial shroud, and by night she secretly pulled it apart. Penelope was not simply waiting. She was fighting time itself. But how long can hope remain loyalty before it becomes a prison? The king who did not come home. When Odysseus left Ithaca for the Trojan War, Penelope could not know that his absence would consume 20 years of their lives. The first 10 belonged to war. While armies fought at Troy, Penelope remained in Ithaca with their son Telemachus and a kingdom whose king was somewhere across the sea. Then Troy fell. For many Greek households, the end of the war meant the beginning of return. Ships brought husbands, fathers, sons, survivors, and terrible news. But no ship brought Odysseus. That uncertainty is what makes Penelope's story different from ordinary mourning. She had no body to bury and no husband to welcome home. Every rumor could become hope. Every empty horizon could become another disappointment. And life did not stop while she waited. Telemachus grew from a child into a young man. The palace still had to function. Servants still needed direction. Property still had to be protected. Decisions still had to be made in the name of a household whose master might be alive, dead, imprisoned, shipwrecked, or walking toward home. Penelope's waiting was therefore not a picture of a woman frozen beside a window. It was 20 years of carrying a house through uncertainty. The longer Odysseus remained absent, the more dangerous that uncertainty became, because eventually, other men stopped treating his return as a possibility. The men who ate his house. Suitors began gathering in the palace of Ithaca. They did not wait politely outside. They entered Odysseus' home, consumed his livestock and wine, occupied his halls, and competed for Penelope's hand. Their pressure was romantic only in the loosest sense. A marriage to Penelope meant access to the household of a missing king. Her private grief had become a political struggle. The suitors wanted an answer. Choose one of us. Remarry. Accept that Odysseus is gone. But the demand was larger than marriage. Whoever became Penelope's husband would enter a household that still carried Odysseus' name, wealth, memory, and authority. Every meal the suitors consumed inside the palace made their message more physical. The missing king could not defend what belonged to him. Telemachus could see it happening as he grew older. The home that should have carried his father's presence was being occupied by men who behaved as if the future had already been decided. Penelope's refusal, therefore, protected more than romantic loyalty. It protected the possibility that Odysseus still had a place to return to. To do that, Penelope would have to make a declaration that the sea had never given her the evidence to make. If she married another man and Odysseus returned, she would have closed the door on a life that still existed. If she refused forever and he never returned, she might surrender the rest of her own life to someone who had become only memory. The suitors could see delay. Penelope could see consequence. And she understood that some choices cannot be taken back once they are made. She could not sail across the Mediterranean and search every island herself. She could not force trustworthy news to arrive. She could not simply remove a crowd of powerful nobles from the palace. So she used the weapon available to her. Time. The queen who fought time with thread. Penelope told the suitors that she would choose a new husband when she finished weaving a burial shroud for Laertes, Odysseus' elderly father. It sounded reasonable. By day, everyone could see her at the loom. The cloth grew. The work advanced. The promised decision seemed to be getting closer. Then night came, and Penelope secretly unraveled what she had woven. Morning after morning, the suitors saw progress. Night after night, Penelope erased it. Homer says the deception lasted for 3 years before it was exposed in the fourth. That image should change the way we see Penelope. She was not merely faithful. She was strategic. The loom was not only domestic work. It became a way to control the one thing the suitors were trying to take from her, the timing of her decision. Every thread pulled loose bought another night. Every night preserved the possibility that Odysseus was still alive. And every morning forced her to begin again without knowing whether the hope she was protecting was real. The beauty of the trick is that Penelope does not defeat the suitors by overpowering them. She turns their own expectation against them. They believe the cloth is moving toward completion. Penelope understands that the appearance of progress can be used to prevent the conclusion they want. The palace sees weaving. Penelope sees borrowed time. For 3 years, the loom becomes a quiet battlefield inside her own home. That is where the emotional power of Penelope begins to reach beyond Ithaca. Most of us will never face a palace full of suitors. But many people know what it is like to keep a place open for someone whose return is uncertain, to defend a promise that outsiders no longer understand, or to wonder whether patience is protecting love or postponing an ending. Penelope could not know the final chapter. Neither can we when we are still living in the middle of our own stories. If this kind of myth makes ancient Greece feel alive rather than distant, please like, share, and leave a comment. Your support helps gods and heroes Unveiled keep returning to the old stories, not just to explain what happened, but to understand why these choices still feel human. The husband still fighting his way home. Penelope's waiting would be a very different story if Odysseus had simply forgotten her. The Odyssey does not give us that story. Odysseus' return is delayed by war, shipwreck, monsters, divine hostility, captivity, and his own choices. But the poem repeatedly turns his attention toward home. In Book 5, while he is with Calypso, he is offered something almost no mortal could expect: immortality. And still he longs for Ithaca and Penelope. That matters. Penelope is not preserving a marriage while the other person calmly builds a new life without her. On the other side of the sea, Odysseus is also being pulled through years he did not expect to lose. The two stories move differently. Penelope's battlefield is the house. Odysseus' battlefield is the journey home. This contrast is important because the Odyssey gives both waiting and wandering a cost. Penelope is surrounded by the same walls while the people inside them change. Odysseus crosses extraordinary distances while the image of home remains fixed in his mind. One is trapped by staying. The other is trapped by not being able to stay anywhere. Their suffering does not look the same, but both stories are pulled toward Ithaca. She resists men who want her to declare the marriage over. He survives a world that keeps delaying his return. Neither can see what the other is enduring. That is one reason their reunion cannot be simple. 20 years do not disappear because two people finally stand in the same room. Before love can become recognition again, trust has to cross the distance too. The stranger inside her house. When Odysseus finally reaches Ithaca, Penelope does not immediately know him. He returns disguised as a stranger. For years, Penelope has heard rumors, prophecies, travelers, and stories about where her husband might be. Hope has trained her to be careful. Another hopeful claim is not enough. So she questions the stranger. She listens to what he says about Odysseus. She wants information, but wanting something to be true does not make it true. This is one of the most psychologically precise parts of the Odyssey, and it remains completely inside the myth. Penelope has waited 20 years for good news. When good news finally stands in front of her, she is afraid to believe it too quickly. Hope has disappointed her too many times. The woman famous for waiting is not gullible. She is difficult to convince. That makes her stronger, not colder. For 20 years, almost every story about Odysseus has arrived without Odysseus himself. Penelope has learned the difference between wanting certainty and possessing it. Her caution is the scar left by prolonged hope. This is why the reunion has to earn its way toward recognition. If Penelope believed immediately, the 20 years would feel weightless. Instead, Homer allows those years to remain in the room with them. Odysseus may have returned to the island, but he has not yet returned to Penelope. First, the house itself has to change. The bow and the blood in the hall. Penelope brings out Odysseus' great bow and announces a contest. She will marry the man who can string it and shoot an arrow through 12 axes. The suitors try. They fail. Then the disguised stranger takes the bow. He succeeds. The moment is more than a display of strength. The weapon belongs to the missing king, and suddenly the man everyone treated as powerless can do what none of the men occupying his house can do. The balance of the palace changes. For years the suitors have eaten in Odysseus' hall as if his absence were permanent. Now his own bow passes into the hands of the man they failed to recognize. The object that once belonged to the missing king becomes proof that the story of the house is not finished. What follows is violent. Odysseus reveals himself, and the hall that had been consumed by the suitors becomes the place where their power ends. But even after the suitors are gone, Penelope does not simply run forward and accept the first explanation she is given. Euryclea tells her that Odysseus has returned. Penelope remains cautious. After 20 years, even the end of danger is not enough to erase uncertainty. There is still one final question. Is this truly the man who left Ithaca? The bed no stranger could know. Penelope chooses a test that has nothing to do with war, nothing to do with monsters, nothing to do with heroic reputation. She tells the servants to move their marriage bed. Odysseus reacts immediately. The bed cannot simply be moved. He built it around the trunk of a living olive tree rooted into the ground of their home. That knowledge belongs to them. A stranger could imitate a story. A stranger could repeat a rumor. A stranger could claim a name. But he could not know the secret architecture of a marriage bed built around a tree that was still alive beneath it. Only then does Penelope know. And suddenly, one of the longest journeys in Greek epic ends not with a battlefield, a monster, or a god descending from the sky, but with a private detail inside a bedroom. The olive tree bed is the perfect final proof because it connects everything the story has been asking. What survives 20 years? Not appearance. Not youth. Not certainty. Memory. Shared knowledge. A home built around something rooted deeply enough that distance could not erase it. Penelope's loyalty was never only about refusing other men. At the end, it becomes the ability to recognize the one thing no outsider could counterfeit. The man before her knows how their home was built because he helped build it. The weight finally has evidence. And notice how different that evidence is from the kind the suitors demanded. They wanted Penelope to treat absence as proof that the marriage was over. Penelope waits until she possesses proof that the man before her is truly Odysseus. Her final act is not blind faith. It is verification. What 20 years changed? In Book 23, Penelope and Odysseus finally come together after 20 years apart. But the people who reunite are not the young husband and wife who separated before Troy. Penelope has carried the household, the suitors' fear for Telemachus, and the uncertainty of not knowing whether she was a wife or a widow. Odysseus has carried war, wandering, loss, temptation, shipwreck, and the desire to return. They have each lived a life the other could not see. So their reunion is not simply a reward for patience. It is an encounter between two people who must tell each other what the missing years contained. That may be the deepest reason Penelope's story still works. The myth does not say that everyone should wait forever. It does not prove that endurance automatically makes love noble. Penelope's 20 years matter because Odysseus is also trying to come home. Her hope is eventually met by his return. Without that movement from the other side, the same waiting could mean something very different. That distinction is where the ancient story becomes personal without leaving ancient Greece behind. You may never stand at a Mycenaean loom or watch black ships disappear into the Ionian Sea. But you may know the experience of holding on to a promise while time keeps asking whether it is still real. Penelope does not give us a number. She gives us a question. What evidence does hope deserve before it asks for another year of your life? And she gives us one more answer through the olive tree. When Odysseus finally stands before her, she does not trust the promise. She trusts what only the two of them could know. If you want gods and heroes unveiled to keep exploring the gods, heroes, monsters, wars, betrayals, prophecies, and impossible choices of the ancient Greek world, please like, share, and tell me which myth we should enter next. And if Penelope's story left you thinking about your own life, there is one question worth carrying with you. How long is too long to wait for someone you love?